it's really difficult to engineer freedom tech, like, solutions that like require you to kind of take ownership of your money, take ownership of your data. These things, typically have engineering solutions that are harder to build. They might take a longer time to build, or it might actually require the user to kind of learn something new, or it requires just a new way of us thinking about product building. So it kind of ends up being this, huge disadvantage in that regard.
Is there something inherent and even maybe some would argue noble, I think, about self sovereignty, freedom tech requiring friction? Stephen DeLorme, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean.
I appreciate it. I love the ATL BitLab background. So,
Yeah,
how are
thanks.
things in maybe sunny Georgia?
Yeah, things are going great. Vibes are high at ATL BitLab as always. Just got another Bitcoin meetup in the lab here tonight. It's every single Wednesday night here, so things are going good, and just looking forward to 2026 and what the community will build.
Awesome. Yeah. And for anyone in Atlanta or the surrounding areas, definitely recommend you check out ATL BitLab. I'll be sure to have the links in the show notes. It is a great space with even greater people, which I've had the opportunity to spend some time in and with. So we are, if I am doing my calendar math correctly, Stephen, we're recording 2 days after Square's Bitcoin launch. And that is now available to 4 million merchants, in-person merchants. I'm not sure actually if that's what they call in person or in total. It is a product as I've seen, and I want to get your take with, really strong UX, great design, fully custodial. And so I think the timing is perfect to, with you, explore the tension between the sort of purity of freedom tech, as it were, Bitcoin most specifically, and designing for freedom. And in that, people like yourselves, you're very much in the center of this, are taking into consideration what non-technical, everyday individuals want and need. And so, with that, let's talk about sort of the seduction of great product design and smooth UX. So Cash App, Venmo, even some custodial wallets, they are, I think, winning because the UX is just buttery smooth, the user experience.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, some self-custody tools can feel like operating a nuclear reactor. And
Yeah.
so as a product designer, and let's take a moment as you answer to give us a bit of insight into your work. How do you think about this fundamental challenge or disadvantage that Freedom Tech comes out of the gate with?
Yeah. So I'll briefly kind of summarize my experience in this space. I didn't really start off in freedom tech like most people. I was just a graphic design major in college. Spent the first part of my career doing mostly design, more focused on marketing and advertising and that sort of stuff. Of course, you kind of have to know some amount of building for the web to be, competent these days as a designer. We're in a digital first world now. So I kind of fell into web design, web development, and then, kind of fell into freedom tech along the way there. And then kind of transitioned into product design from there. Um, did work with the Bitcoin design community under a Spiral grant. Now I work on product at Voltage from a design perspective, and I mean it's a huge disadvantage for people building freedom tech because I think for a couple reasons. One, you have this idea that when you live somewhere like, let's say, the USA, where more or less your freedoms are respected, like, sure, everyone will have gripes here and there about something they don't like in their particular city or state or, something the president said or whatever. But by and large, we live in a place where, like, your freedoms are more or less respected. And, you know, that's creates a situation where you don't really need freedom tech. Like, you can benefit from it, but you don't like need it the way that someone living under an authoritarian regime needs it right this second. Um, you might need it one day, but right now you don't like need it to carry on your daily business. And then there's this other idea that I think it's really difficult to engineer freedom tech, like, solutions that like require you to kind of take ownership of your money, take ownership of your data. These things, typically have engineering solutions that are harder to build, or, they might be harder to build. They might take a longer time to build, or it might actually require the user to kind of learn something new, or it requires just a new way of us thinking about product building. So it kind of ends up being this, huge, disadvantage in that regard.
Is there, in your view, Stephen, is there something inherent and even maybe some would argue noble, I think, about self-sovereignty, freedom tech requiring friction? What's your perspective on that?
Should self sovereignty and freedom tech require friction? I don't think so. I don't think it has to involve friction.
So
Um,
you don't buy that assertion, which I would assert many builders say, is that in order to learn, you got to suffer.
Yeah, and I think people, it's kind of like the whole idea of like there's a band that you go to listen to at your local club, and it's like, you know, it's a band, people from your community making music, and then, one day they get a record deal, and then, they get bigger and bigger, and then one day they're playing the Super Bowl, and you're like, I don't like them anymore. I
They
liked them when
sold
they used
out.
to play in the clubs. Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, there's this kind of idea that, like, as something becomes more accessible, when you find something early on, you like it more because it's like, well, I had to work hard to find it. I had to follow this one obscure Instagram account just to know when this band was playing, and everybody else has the benefit of finding them now on Spotify. I had to work to listen to this band. And I think and you can see this kind of thing happening in computing too, where it's like, well, I used to have to work to understand how to use computers.
I
Now it's all
compiled
just
my
easy.
kernel and now it just installs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I don't like that kind of like hipster mentality of, just because something is more accessible, it's no longer good. I do think there are some interesting ideas though, like it has been argued before that, sometimes computer software maybe makes it too easy these days. And like the idea is that, like, in the 90s, you wanted to learn how to use a piece of software, you would get a manual for how to use Adobe Illustrator that was like this thick. I mean, it was like
Absolutely.
3 inches thick for people
That
who were just
section in
listening.
the bookstore, had those
Yeah.
20-pound tomes.
But the thing is you actually really, just by having this more mentality of like, well, I'm going to go read how to do it in the manual, I think you actually learned how to use the software at a much deeper level. Um, so I do think there is some merit to sometimes with software just saying, look, if you want this piece of software to fulfill your purpose, for me, that might be graphic design, you need to educate yourself about how to use it. That's
Hmm.
going to make you a better, more powerful user of this piece of software. Having said that, I don't think every single software in the world needs to be to that degree. Like, if you want to use a piece of design software and you want to just, totally slay at, making designs or making video or making whatever you're using in your particular piece of software, yes, you do need to kind of read the manual, go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and really educate yourself. But I don't think every single piece of software, like certainly just a messaging app or visiting a website or sending money back and forth, I don't think that necessarily needs to be the friction. So I think it's more of a matter of like what kinds of software requires, friction. Maybe to like, I know I'm going on a little bit of a rant here,
No,
but
it's
like
good.
another way to think about it is maybe in terms of friction, maybe you don't want friction so much as you want um, slowness,
Mm,
right? And so, like, I think of friction as being like, well, it was really difficult. It was really confusing. I didn't know how to do it.
right.
When I was using this particular piece of software, I I got the impression that it was buggy or I didn't understand what it was telling me. That's what I think of when I think of friction. But if, for example, like let's say you're trying to onboard customers to some kind of multi-sig solution that's going to, help them self-custody like, multitudes of Bitcoins. You might want that to be a slow experience. You might not want people to just download that thing and start using it immediately and just throw caution to the wind.
Right.
You might want it to be a very slow onboarding. Like, okay, we're going to onboard you to a solution for self-custodying your money. We don't want you to do this if you're in a coffee shop or if you're at a party or surrounded by lots of people.
This is not a
We want
speed
you to be
run.
in a calm. Yeah, we want you to be in a calm environment, but you can still imagine it being a very like easy or kind of like handheld process of like,
Right.
this is going to take an hour to complete. It has 10 steps. Are you ready to begin? You can save you can come back and and resume this later
Mm.
if, you get interrupted. So you can make it a very calm, handheld, understandable process and make it kind of slow, and that in my mind is different than like friction, which I think of
Right.
as like really kind of negative and harsh and confusing.
I think that is super interesting. So what I take from that is there is friction, for lack of a better word, and there's pace.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, because I think about patterns like which are now I believe and hopefully are standard, um, requiring you to enter your seed phrase, play it back to prove that you've recorded it, that you haven't just YOLO'd through a seed phrase, for example. And so from that, and you touched on this, let's talk about, the cost of making it easy or too easy. So one of your projects, 12 Cash, makes sharing payment information very, very simple. But simplicity, often means abstraction. Abstraction implies a certain level of trust. Where do you draw the line between simple enough to use and easy enough to fool you?
The distinction between simple enough to use and easy enough to fool you. Yeah, that's a good question because I think, we've seen certainly like controversies online as of late of like, products that, people felt confused by what was actually happening in the interface. Um, I don't know. It's a very tough problem to solve. I think, you know, I really just think about it as in terms of trying to figure out who you're trying to build for,
Right.
right? Like you don't I don't think you ever want to fool anybody.
Sure, of course.
That's a dark pattern, in the UI world we call those dark
Yes.
patterns where it's like when you're trying to cancel a gym membership or something like that, and they make do you sure you want to cancel? And then they
Right.
make they make the cancel button, the no, keep my membership button, like the big, primary solid color button that your eye, gets drawn to.
Yes.
So yes, you don't want to fool anybody. You don't want like dark patterns or anything like that. I think just from a like moral perspective. Um, but I think you really just got to think about like who you're building for and like, what problem they're actually trying to solve. You brought up the Square terminal earlier, and they're, I don't think of like the Square product as being like for dissidents or
Certainly.
unbanked people or
Certainly.
anything like that. It's really they're just trying to solve a problem for like local businesses of like, a coffee shop, for instance, probably before they can afford the real estate for their coffee shop, they probably are pouring cups of espresso at a local farmer's market. And
Right.
previously, they were an all cash business. Now, like with Square, they can like start accepting credit cards, right? And so, like, custody and all that is like totally acceptable for that kind of customer. They're not really operating in like a high friction environment. If you're building stuff that's like, for human rights activists and stuff, you have to think about like all these other things about like, they actually need custody of the money because most, banks and fintech providers won't even serve their country. You need to think about like, being able to like, hide the money and make plausible deniability in case they're like arrested or something
Yes.
like that. So it's a completely different end of the spectrum. Voltage, a lot of the work that we're doing these days, we kind of, I'll say like 2021, the narrative was very much run your own node,
Mhm.
right? Like run your own Lightning node. And a lot of businesses wanted to do that. But we've kind of, as we've gotten to know our customers better and gotten to know the kind of customers that want to learn about Bitcoin and start accepting Bitcoin, we started to learn that for a lot of them, like running a Lightning node wasn't really important to them. They just wanted to be able to accept Lightning payments.
Right.
And so for us, our solution to that problem was we're going to open a line of credit to your business, and you can hit our API, send Lightning payments as much as you want, as long as you pay back your line of credit, you know, at the end of your billing
Mhm.
cycle. And so, I think it's just a matter of understanding what it is that your actual customers need before you start building, because it's very easy from like a engineering, like I run into this myself. It's very appealing for me to want to build things that are like kind of technically fascinating and like
Absolutely.
scratch a
Sure.
technical itch in my brain. Even as a designer, I fall victim to that. But when you're thinking about it from like a product perspective, you really need to think about like who it is you're building for and like what solves the problem for them.
Yes, and I think as you were speaking, and I mean, kudos to you and the Voltage team. I think the line of credit, knowing many of you as I do, um, and having some insight into how the product has evolved, I think Voltage is a great example of meeting the market, meeting customers where they are, and and it brings to mind this sort of slider, between pure protocol, sort of adherence and self-sovereignty and user experience and customer needs and wants. And I know it's very difficult. And it's an ongoing process to sort of dial that in, as it were. Well, let me ask about maybe a few more specifics, Stephen, and those are great backdrops. You touched on the pace and needing to sort of slow down the intense, potentially high value, high risk flows of something like custodying your money, multi sig, for example. Are there other areas where friction is positive, beneficial, and again, it's my word, not yours, but that sort of um, not hiding all the details, so sort of surfacing some of the complexity, and so that's sort of part A. Where are there patterns or areas where you see that as necessary and positive, and with it, are there are there's advice or cautionary notes you could offer to people about being more aware um, of some of those dark patterns? So, where is there a positive application of what I would call friction, and where instead are we sort of seeing these dark patterns that are designed to fool the end user?
Hmm. Well, I don't think I see a lot of dark patterns in like Bitcoin and freedom tech
No, no,
stuff so
but the
much,
alternatives,
but
right? The
because
alternatives,
yeah, um, I would say, in terms of the freedom tech world, where like friction might be good, like some would argue that fees maybe, like, if you just want like more transparency
right?
over fees, I kind of don't know. I kind of don't worry about that nearly as much, just because I feel like, at least from a Lightning perspective, I think a lot of the times the fees are so low that you don't really run into an issue. But totally, if you're running some kind of service like, I don't know, like a wallet that accepts on-chain and Lightning, and there's like some kind of conversion happening there, you could certainly run into a situation where like, converting between Lightning and on-chain could like maybe create some unexpected fee.
Right.
So I
You're doing a
guess
swap
now
or
that I'm kind
something,
of yeah, I guess as I work this out, as I talk about it, I think that could be a place where maybe a little more, a slower pace or
right?
friction might be warranted, and that like you don't want to like it's very convenient to feel like, oh, it just kind of all magically swaps
Hmm.
into whatever format the user's requesting. But if that swap is going to like eat up like 25% of the value of whatever it is, it's like, yeah, you might want to caution them and make them aware of that.
Right.
um I think, when it comes to stuff like Noster, actually, a lot of people are trying to like onboard everybody to Noster very quickly and all that kind of stuff. And I guess it kind of depends on your perspective of Nostr. I'm a little bit of a black sheep when it comes to Nostr, and I think about it a little bit differently. But, there's this one kind of philosophy of Nostr that's like, oh, like your Nostr key is going to be like your self-sovereign identity, and you're gonna use this for all of your Nostr applications to represent your identity. Well, if that is your philosophy of how Nostr works, then you probably want a little bit of a slower paced introduction, I think, because you don't want people making this identity and then losing it.
Right.
There's also the more ephemeral view of Nostr, which I tend to lend myself more towards, which is like the kind of bit chat version of
Mm,
Nostr, where you're actually not even aware that you're using
yes.
Nostr, and you download BitChat, and it's this like kind of ephemeral identity. Like there's not this illusion with BitChat that you're going to be like using the same identity every single time you log on. And so with that regard, it's actually very easy to just onboard people quickly. You don't need that friction with that kind of philosophy of Nostr. But yeah, I think it's really just those kinds of things where you're going to like cause somebody to lose money, or you're asking them to create an identity or something like that. I feel like those really lend themselves to a slower, more handheld pace. Um, but yeah, I mean, the kind of like dark patterns I think we want to avoid are, we want to like avoid, in like in the regular world, that's stuff like you're trying to cancel something and you're trying to trick somebody into not canceling it, or you're tricking people into upgrading to a new member, like a higher level of membership towards something, or you're trying to opt people in to sharing their data. Like,
Right.
uh, you automatically have the box selected that says, yes, please add me to your marketing list and share my personal information with your advertising network.
Right.
It's like,
Or I think of Venmo,
that's kind of
which I
stuff.
think the social aspects, and I haven't been on in years, so I'm not qualified to say what it looks like these days. But there was this playfulness about sharing. As many would joke, it's like I know who you pay rent to and who your weed dealer is. Because it's all out there. And so,
Yeah.
are there? I don't know that you spend a lot of time looking at this, Stephen, but in payments specifically, do you see much of that going on, and that individuals should be wary of?
I think with Venmo, I just don't get it.
Mm.
Like, I've never used it. I refuse to download it, and I know it's very popular among my generation,
Yeah.
but I never understood the appeal of like, I'm going to like have all my payments like broadcasted
Right.
publicly. That just seems kind of weird. Um, I don't know if I would call that a dark pattern. I guess just because I guess I guess people are
They're
aware
pretty
of it, and
upfront
I
about
guess
it.
people like it.
Yeah. And it's,
I don't get it.
yeah, it's not for us to convince someone that they should or shouldn't do anything, but I think it is worthwhile to call out, and I believe this is fair, correct me if you disagree, that in traditional sort of TradFi payments, you know, uh, you are the product in many ways.
Yeah.
There's a vig on the payment. They're making some money on the payment, but the data, to use the cliche, is the new oil. Where I think what Bitcoin offers you in most cases is anonymity, if not total privacy.
Yeah, if you're using it right. I would say I could speak to that a little. I mean, what a
Please.
lot of people don't realize is like it's scary how much, data about you is already being sold through like credit and debit cards and stuff like
Yes.
that. Um, I remember before I moved into freedom tech, and I'd say this is probably a catalyst for, um, my kind of transition to freedom tech, is I used to do a lot of marketing and advertising for like B2B tech stuff. Not the kind of stuff you'd see on TV usually, because like I said, more B2B kind
Right.
of stuff. But I had to work on like marketing videos for so many products that are like deployed at, large enterprises, that are really just about this, about like, collecting large amounts of data on people, trying to come up with insights about, individuals and what they might buy. And I mean, get this, one time I had to work on a video that was not even get this, it wasn't even, it was not never going to be seen by end users. It was never going to be seen even as a business market, like advertising to other businesses. This was a video designed to pitch a single data analytics idea to some executives at a very large soft drink company that everyone probably drinks. And so and I was like looking at all the people in the room working on the video with me, good people, all of them, good designers to work with. But I'm like looking at it and I'm like trying to calculate, like, well, we've been working on this for a couple weeks now. And I'm like, wow, this video probably has a budget of at least $30,000. This was a, a probably a budget of $30,000 to make a video designed to pitch an idea to like a group of 5 people. And that's how much money
Right.
is in data and analytics. It is such a like profitable money machine that, you know, dropping 30K just to pitch the idea to a group of 5 people is totally worth it in their book. And I worked on the other project for a company that all they do is hook into, like, they partner with banks and say, give us all the data about your customers' financial transactions, and then we will find advertisers who want to advertise to them, and we'll kind of like do like a matchmaking operation between that. And a lot of major banks that everybody knows the names of actually, are customers of this company.
And it is
So,
routine, right?
uh,
And I think
yeah,
that's the thing that is worth taking away among great points there. If anyone wants to try this out, sign up for one of these services that automates the process of getting your data removed from brokers and getting them to stop collecting. I use one in particular. I'll remember what it is at some point. I've been enrolled for about 6 months, and they're at 900 data brokers and counting that have my data that they're
wow,
removing me from. So they say, I believe. And many will not sort of agree to a checkbox that says, you know, don't start again. They will start again. And I'll have to do this process continually. So, all that to say, it is remarkable what a massive industry that is behind the scenes. And that is the de facto with not just payments apps, but certainly financial um, services stand to gain the most. Well, on that note, Stephen, let's talk more about Square. So, as we said, they rolled out Bitcoin payments to millions of merchants. I don't know about you. I took a look. Someone floated their onboarding video, their merchant-facing onboarding video. Looked quite straightforward to me. Um, what's your read? Is this how Bitcoin wins? Is it a necessary step in turn? Yeah. So please.
probably how Bitcoin wins. Yeah, I mean, it's just one more step in Bitcoin, gaining the mass adoption that, a lot of people in the Bitcoin industry are crazy for. Um, I think I think it's a great move, actually. Like, I think the problem with a like trying to onboard merchants to Bitcoin before, um, there's a couple problems with it. Like, one, when a lot of times when Bitcoiners go with this narrative of, you know, we're trying to fix inflation and like, oh my God, every problem in our
Fix the money,
society is
fix the
caused by
world.
inflation. Yeah, and they're like, dude, I'm just trying to pour coffee for people and like, make ends meet at the end of the
Right.
month. Like and so you got to meet, I think, business owners where they're at, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to get customers, they're trying to retain customers, and they're trying to lower their expenses too. And so with definitely with the fee model, like the really like
Absolutely.
low fee model, like that's huge. Another kind of problem with onboarding merchants before was, just like we've talked about, like the friction with kind of self custodial wallets. Even if that business owner, if you can kind of, convince them like, yeah, you should download the self custodial wallet, and they might use it for their own personal uses, but it's a much more complicated matter to like onboard a business where you might be hiring somebody to, work in your coffee shop, to continue this example, who you don't know very well. You count the cash register at the end of the night, right? Like that's just typical for any business. You can't just have a situation where like everybody, every person you hire for your business has access to the self-custodial Bitcoin. And I know there's certainly great solutions like BTC Pay Server and all that, but typically it's been kind of hard to onboard people. And there's been a lot of, community initiatives around the world to like onboard people, like, oh, we're going to go out to businesses and try and, convince them to accept Bitcoin. But you got to think about it. It's kind of like you're trying to onboard them to a self-custodial Bitcoin wallet. Who's the tech support for that business? That has always been, that's why I've in the past have never like really tried to do much community outreach here in Atlanta, because it's like, I'm a busy guy. I don't want to do tech support. Like one-on-one, I'm happy to like talk to, people and answer the questions about Bitcoin. But like, I don't want to get into a situation where like me and my friends are like kind of like free tech support
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
local businesses.
We do that for our
So yeah, the
families
Square
already.
thing
That's
is great.
enough.
Yeah, exactly. The Square thing is great because it's like it meets them where they're at in terms of fee savings, and it also is kind of like bundled into a service that already has tech support. And I can on that note, by the time this podcast drops, I'm sure the announcement will already be out there. So there's kind of an initiative.
We're publishing today,
that
so be
Haley
careful. If it's
oh no, I think
okay.
the tweet is supposed to go out this morning.
Great.
So Haley Burko and Matt Balas from Spiral have been working on this kind of like merchant adoption initiative. And so a lot of the Bitcoin community spaces around the world are helping. ATL BitLab's involved. I think both of the Bitcoin parks and the space are involved, and probably some other ones that I'm forgetting at the moment. We basically have like these Bitcoin plushies, like the Grumpy Bitcoin, the Here Comes
That
Bitcoin.org.
explains the box
So
of them that I saw at Bitcoin Park last night.
exactly.
Okay.
So we got a bunch of boxes here too. And so we're starting a movement. So we're sending out a ATL BitLab street team with plushies and onboarding letters to try and onboard our favorite businesses. And the kind of letter, it's actually very cute and adorable. It's kind of like written from the perspective of the grumpy
Love
Bitcoin.
it.
And it's like, why am I grumpy? It's like, because I'm grumpy because of 3% credit card fees.
Nice.
And it's just like the whole like, campaign they've started is really like meeting merchants where they're
Right.
at, which is not like talking about
Liquidity
inflation and freedom. Yeah. It's just like, hey, if you're already a Square merchant, you can turn this option on. If you're not a Square merchant, we can help you with that. But like,
Right.
if you're already a Square merchant, you can turn it on. You can save money on fees, and that'll be great. And so we're going to start some more stuff at BitLab here, just in terms of like, if some of these merchants have questions, we can have like a merchant night or something where people, like a merchant town hall. But by and large, we'll probably just be driving people to the Bitcoin merchants like Facebook group. And that's really just like meeting merchants where they're at, solving a problem for them. So yes, I think Square, and answer your question, I think what Square is doing is great. And it's just kind of another little domino that gets tipped. We'll see who's next.
Love it. Well, and in fact, on that note, who else would you give accolades perhaps to, Stephen, who you think is balancing usability with trust or permissionlessness, if we want to sort of put that on the other end of the spectrum? Who's doing a good job of striking that balance?
Wow, that's a good question. Wonder else who is striking permissionlessness and trust. Like, I would say in terms of my favorite products, and is this Bitcoin specific or just broadly freedom tech?
Broadly, anything you care to draw attention to.
My favorite one that I like, people have always heard me talk about, is Signal. I think that just I compare most freedom tech products against Signal.
Absolutely.
Because I've been using them for 8 years, and I think I'll probably still be using them for 8 years. And I think just in terms of being easy to onboard people to, I've never really had to hold anybody's hands much. I can basically just tell somebody to download the app and then message me on it. It's built in such a way to where it actually doesn't really expose private keys. It really, kind of stores it in the phone's enclave and keeps it kind of hidden so that the user doesn't have a foot gun. They can't accidentally shoot themselves in the foot and expose their key material. So that one has just been like a true blessing. And, you're talking about balancing permissionlessness and trust. Like, they can't read your messages. It does rely on some centralized, like, kind of signal coordination
Hmm.
servers. Um, and, in that regard, I guess that is a, single point of failure, which isn't great. But I think that we've seen a pretty good track record of good behavior on terms of like the signal, like found, and like just being run by a nonprofit
Right.
foundation, I think is a pretty good model. So I think that like it's really, really easy from like an engineering standpoint to kind of become fascinated with decentralization and be like, we need everything decentralized and we need everything distributed. And I don't really know if that's a good way to think about it. I think it's a more of a model of like, well, what kinds of things need to be
Right.
decentralized? What kinds of things need to be distributed, and how much do they need to be so? And so when we talk about Bitcoin nodes, if we talk about like Bitcoin being this like source of money for the world, like, yes, obviously we want Bitcoin to be as decentralized, decentralized AF, but and we want like, decentralized Bitcoin nodes at all costs. But when we think about other kinds of technology, it's like you may actually get to a point where too much decentralization actually makes it like, just like, ungodly hard to use. So I think Signal strikes that balance. They just like they focus solely on like, we want it to be private, we don't want there to be user foot guns. We'll accept a little bit of centralization trade-offs. We just want it to be super private, super easy, no user foot guns. So I think that they do that very well. In terms of, like Unchained is another product I'm a fan of on the Bitcoin
Absolutely.
side. It's like, they're and their whole thing is they'll like, look, we're centralized. We can, obviously if we are part of your multi-sig quorum, we can see your money. So they don't really they don't really focus so much on like the, privacy side, I feel like, but they do focus on like this core idea that like, we will not custody your money. um like, and if you do want to enter into like some kind of loan agreement with us or whatever, we're going to have like a third party have one of the keys. They're very, very good at
Yes.
that. So I think it's just like a really like an idea of trying to figure out like what is like the core value and like the most important part of your product. For Signal, it's privacy. For Unchained, it's like we want to encourage self custody. At Voltage now, we our kind of efforts mostly now is like easy engineering integration and interoperability, right? So like, for us, we're focusing more on making it easy for engineering teams to adopt, and we're focusing on making it interoperable with any other, Bitcoin and Lightning service. That's kind of where our focus is right now. So I think it's like, my some of my favorite products are just the ones that really, really know what the thing is that they're trying to optimize
And for
for,
whom,
and
as you
just
said
drilling
earlier,
hard
right?
into that.
Yeah, know
Yeah.
your audience, know your customer.
Yeah.
Great points, and I'm big fans of both. And I think it's interesting, and Signal does deserve tremendous accolades and credit. They are the one most everyone starts with because they're such a shining example. So shout out to Signal, and everyone I think should be using it.
And another product I can think of from a Freedom Tech perspective, that I think does a really great job is Proton, and just the whole suite of Proton services, Proton Mail, Proton Calendar, Proton Drive. And I do not get paid to shill them, though I kind of wish they would reach out because
Nice.
I feel like I
Yeah,
shill
you and
them
me
so
both.
much. They they just I started as a Proton Mail user when it was like really kind of rough around the edges and just stuck with it. And it's been so impressive to see their whole product stack, and kind of similar to, Signal, they've isolated what it is that they want to optimize around, which is privacy. And, you have that centralization, you know, thing right there, but they're not optimizing for decentralization. They're optimizing for privacy. And I think that just
Yes.
goes to show that from a business perspective, there is business models around freedom tech, but I think you just can't go into it trying to, tick every single box on day one. You can't be like, we are going to be private. We are going to be decentralized. We are going to be peer to peer. We're going to be interoperable. Like you can imagine like all these different metrics you could try and optimize for. And it's really, really, really difficult to optimize for all of those. And when you do like Proton and you choose to just optimize for like one or two things, you can really make a ton of progress as a product and actually get like long-term sustainable customers. So yeah, find your core value and optimize for that is my take.
Yes, agree completely. And I think and I'm also a longtime Proton user, and they, if I'm not mistaken, have 100 million users. So it is remarkable the scale that they've reached with privacy as the primary selling point. And they remind me, as some others do, that long ago, long ago, Google, their mantra was "Don't be evil." And that has long since been struck from all documentation, websites, and the like. But I think Proton and Unchained, in their own way, are examples of a bigger, better commitment, which is can't be evil, right? Unchained, and I'm a client, delighted client, great team, know so many of them, big fan. Not taking any money, so just to say that they're a great product and a great company. They can help you, they cannot materially harm you. So if they were compelled, as you said, they could disclose some details, but they cannot take control of funds. Proton, while centralized, because of the way they're very, in my mind, sound cryptography works. You do lose some features. I can't easily integrate Proton Calendar into some slick, native desktop app, but they cannot see my data. They cannot, as someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but they can't be evil in that regard, which I think is a great shout out to them. If we then transition, Stephen, to what I think I understand that you and other product designers, UX designers, sort of human computer interface discipline would study is psychology. And so with this, I'm curious, when someone makes the choice to use Cash App, and that is not a slam on Cash App, it's a great product. When they choose that over, say, a self-custodial wallet, let's just pick Blitz, as a I think a fine example. Not at the technical level, but what's your understanding at the sort of human level, the psychological level? What's the story behind why they make the choice they make? Is it as simple as one is easier, one is harder, or is there more to it?
I think why someone would use Cash App versus a self-custodial one would depend on, like how are they approaching Bitcoin from the start? Like, if they're not a Cash App user and they're not like, let's say they don't have Cash App and they also don't have a Bitcoin wallet. They're starting completely from scratch. It might be that they choose Cash App just because it lets them buy Bitcoin. I mean, that's a huge thing that I think a lot of wallets ignore, is just acquiring Bitcoin. Um, like I know it's very appealing, this idea to like get Bitcoin in a peer-to-peer capacity. But when people are thinking about it more from like an investing use case or a savings use case, they need to actually get Bitcoin. And so it's really, I think for one, it's just a features standpoint. Cash App lets you buy
Can't use it if
Bitcoin
you
and
don't
a
have
lot.
it. Yeah,
Exactly. And so a lot of wallets, it's kind of this cold start problem. It's like, well, yeah, you can download this wallet and there's no KYC and all that, but it's like, what do I do? I just like look at the number zero. Um, another way to look at it might be that like maybe it's they already were a Cash App user. And it's like, well, yeah, I could download, this other wallet, but I already have Cash App. I think there's very much a sense of like app fatigue nowadays of like, I don't want another app.
great
Like,
point.
and this is like among technical and non-technical people. There's just this fatigue with more services and apps and
Mm.
websites you have to register for. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just like, well, I already have Cash App. Why not just use that? Um, and you know,
That's an
and then
interesting, sorry to interrupt. I was just
Mhm.
going to say that, I had this aha moment, which is perhaps should be obvious given that I work in tech and have my whole career is, what struck me as you said that is the preciousness increasingly of the real estate on a user's phone.
Yeah.
And so if you've got an install, what I hear you say is there's going to be a natural incentive to keep adding features so that the user doesn't turn to a different competitive app. It's like, let me jam everything in there, which is the sloppy way to do it. But in effect, once I've got a user, let's retain that user and serve them with every possible feature we can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny because a lot of times in UI design in the West, we're like, we have this tendency to want to make things as simple as possible. And like, if you look at like the evolution of software design from like over the past 30 years, it's gone from interfaces with like, full plane control, cockpit
Right.
kind of situations to just being like, here's a screen with a single sentence and one big blue button. And it's
Yeah.
like that's like and like so we like that in the West, but it's funny if you look at UI design from like China and Vietnam and places in Asia, it's completely the opposite. They love that like cockpit kind of thing, and it's like a different psychology. It's kind of like WeChat, very popular in China, and it's like there's this idea that like this one app handles all of your needs. It's like more of this comforting idea that like everything I need is right here. It takes care of me. And it's not just like actually chatting. It's also like a wallet. It's also a
Mm.
map. Like it's like Google Maps. So it would be like if your Venmo, your iMessage, your Google Maps, Yelp, everything was just like all bundled into one interface. But that's been a very like good business model for WeChat. So anyways, that's more of a tangential thing. There's just this
Well,
really big difference, but
I think here again, what strikes me, and I'm sure there are papers on this all over the place, but it seems that there might be a correlation between a more collectivist society and I think your words, Stephen, take care of me, do it for me, and the rugged individualists that we like to believe we are in the US, which is, no, that's okay. I'll pick and choose. And that would
yeah,
translate into, that device that we carry around with us all day long.
that very well could be. I think that might be part of it. I mean, we definitely have kind of a with the history of capitalism in this country, there's almost like a personal identity wrapped up in brands. And like, this is the thing is like when people really, really like a brand, they start to like kind of identify with that brand, kind of like how I'll wax poetic about, Proton. You kind of, we identify with products and brands that kind of not only we enjoy using, but also that we feel like match our values
Yes.
and like what we stand for and I know and like it's easy to say those kinds of things when we're talking about freedom tech, but this even like comes down to things like fast food brands and all of that. And I remember seeing this like meme online a long time ago. I mean, it was some like really stupid meme, but it was like this like guy being like, what are you doing going to Chipotle and Moe's and places like that to get a burrito? Like Taco Bell was there for you with like that value meal and all of that. And it was like, but it's true. It's like people have these like
Yeah.
emotional connections with things. And like,
Yeah.
for somebody, it might be that like, yeah, I remember like that Taco Bell value meal when I was in college and didn't have any money. That was dope. So we form these
Yeah.
kinds of things, and so if you can bring somebody into your kind of product vision with like not only the product that you are actually giving them and the value you're giving them, but also like the kind of vision of the world and how you make them feel about it, you can really kind of form a relationship. And you don't want to abuse that relationship, but once that relationship is in place, that opens up the door for you to make all kinds of other kinds of products for those people, keep that customer engaged.
Yes. And I think that is such an interesting and important point to make, which is, and I don't want to be a hypocrite because as I have told anyone who will listen to me and have said many times on the podcast, that after owning an iPhone since 2007 and having Macs since the 90s, I made a switch to another product plug for that no money's exchanged hands, but framework laptop and a Pixel 9 running graphene. So those are my two go-to devices. And so, I sort of purposely broke out of the Apple ecosystem. And my point to all that being, they as a business have done brilliantly. I have bought a frightening amount of their products. Um, but I think the nefariousness, be it designed or incidental, is as those products become more like appliances, and as the experience just becomes smoother and easier and more fully integrated. It's just so easy to do the next thing, with Apple, or to use the next Apple app that they probably have stolen the concept from some third party independent app developer and now integrated it into the operating system, and so on and so forth. And so, that is a rambling lead up, Stephen, to, what would you say to someone nodding along to most of this, that yes, Venmo's fun, even though it exposes my data. Apple is incredible, even though the iPad is an appliance that I can't really, get under the hood and do anything with.
Mhm.
What, if anything, is your call to action to people to get a little more uncomfortable? Or would you? What are those conversations like that you might have with an individual at ATL BitLab or on the street, or, at Chipotle?
Yeah, um, that's a good question. I mean, like, it's kind of like, how do you turn somebody on to freedom tech? And I don't really, I don't know if I know the great answer to
If
that.
there is one, you're
Um,
retired tomorrow.
yeah, that's the thing. Because it's like, I find that people become most interested in these things when something bad happens to them. Um, and I guess my personal experience has been that a lot of times people just don't care until something bad happens. Now you have the kind of the the nerd, the engineer kind of person who, is just intuitively interested in these things. And because they want to know how something works under the hood. There's a whole class of, because I help my friend Jordan out with his show, the Sovereign Computing Show, where he talks a lot of, like, very very much in depth about these things. And it's kind of interesting as we dive into topics on that show. Um, there's a lot of people who are just like, yeah, I want freedom. There's also a whole class of person who's interested in, like, self-hosting just from a, like, kind of academic
Sure.
curiosity perspective. Someone who's just like, I want to set up a home network and self-host all this stuff just because, I'm curious
Yeah,
and I took a
I can.
networking class and I can, yeah. And so I think for that kind of class of person, kind of, your kind of pitch is just like, you know, it's the hackable money wallet, or it's the
Mm,
hackable mail client, it's the hackable messaging thing. It's something that you can, you're almost kind of like pitching it as almost like a toy to them.
sure.
Um, because even though it is useful, it kind of is like the saying, the bigger the boys, the bigger the toys. I don't mean to gender that, but it's
No, but
really
you
is
read
like,
my mind.
you have,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. We used to crack open the hood on the Mustang. The engines are not so accessible anymore, but technology is. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, so exactly. It's like, so for people who enjoy just like the tinkering, that is the allure of freedom tech, is that this stuff is built in a way that you can tinker with it. For everybody else though, for the people who are not, garage tinkerers and, self, PC hobbyists and all
Mhm.
these things, I really find that people need something bad to happen before they get, and that doesn't mean catastrophically bad,
No, but,
but like,
there's a privacy
it's
breach every other day, right? And I often
there's
think
probably,
about
so
that.
they need to be like, yeah, they need to be like, in the headlines, Equifax got hacked again, let's
Yep.
say, for example. And then it's like, click here to find out if you were on the list. Oh crap, I was on the list. What do I do? And then people get interested in that, or like, someone hacked into my email, and like, okay, well now you need to get into password management.
Right.
Um, or it might
Although
be like, mhm.
I wonder, and I'll get your take on this. if there's not a fatigue there. The credit agencies, ironically named, have so little credit, with, I think, the average individual, that breach, that yet another breach is almost like, all right, so I get 6 months of free credit reporting, and God knows what's going to happen to my data. Delete. So I say that to sort of prompt. Do you think it's ratcheting up? Does it have to be catastrophic in order for someone to make a significant change?
It might have to be, but I hope not.
Yeah,
Like,
certainly
I
not what
definitely
I.
when it comes to, I mean, definitely you're right. There is a bunch of fatigue, and there are like an overwhelming number of people. I mean, I hear this opinion all the time when people are just like, I don't care. They have all my data. They're
Yeah,
tracking my every move, and I don't like that attitude a lot.
but it is
Because
there.
I'm just like, yeah, I'm just kind of like, yo, like toughen up. Like, like you
Yeah,
don't want like you're not like
don't
you don't
surrender
want to
that easily.
like fight. Yeah. I One thing I do find is one of the best things in a kind of twisted way to steer people towards freedom tech is politics. And I've kind of told this story on another podcast before, but I'll retell it here. One of my
Please.
favorite, things about like privacy tech is that our opinions about privacy tech in the U.S. totally depend on who's president. Um, and like I remember like okay being like in high school and it's like George W. Bush was president. Everyone was still kind of sore about the oh crap, the name is blanking on me, but the act Congress passed right after 9/11.
Right, right.
But anyways, basically there was all these controversies in the 2000s over like is the government doing warrantless wiretaps, what sorts of powers does the federal government have now to combat terrorism, can that be deployed against US citizens? And the privacy narrative I was hearing in that time in the 2000s was totally about it was totally coming from the left in the US. It was a democratic center left idea that like maybe we should be more private, maybe we should be more concerned about the government's intrusion in our lives. And the center right perspective was no, we need to combat terrorism because terrorists suck. I think they're both valid viewpoints, but my point is, and I mean, certainly everyone has different individual takes, but during that time, it was privacy was, I heard, coming more center left.
Yes.
Then, Obama gets elected, and then the scandal, like the Snowden, scandal and all that, and then everyone on the right is suddenly more like, this happened under Obama's watch. We have
Hmm.
this federal, federal apparatus, surveilling our every move. And everyone on the left was like, no, you can't critique Obama.
Never let a
And,
good crisis go
then
to waste, I think is the.
exactly. Then Trump
Yeah.
gets elected the first time, and suddenly everyone's like, "Oh my God, we need to get journalists using Signal. We need everyone using Signal so that people can exfiltrate information from the White House, and bring down the fascist hierarchy or
Hmm.
whatever." Then suddenly, January 6th happens, and then all of a sudden everyone on the right and like every Republican in my life is just like, Steven, how do I get on Signal so that like I don't want to get
Hey,
banned, I don't want the
whatever it
government read. I'm
takes.
like, dog,
Yeah.
chill. And now we're right back. I mean, the pendulum, like it's so this pendulum just totally swing. And I don't mean to make fun of anybody for their politics here. My point is
Mm,
just that like privacy is a concern no matter who is in
it
office.
is
Like,
apolitical or all political if you wish to view it that way.
yeah, and everything is political. But what I
Yes.
mean is privacy shouldn't be seen as a
Absolutely.
partisan. It shouldn't be seen as
Absolutely.
part because politics is who gets what.
Yes.
But partisan is like, which party are you aligned with? And privacy doesn't need to be a partisan idea. You're always at risk of having your privacy breached. It's just that how we feel about privacy depends on who is the president in the US, at least. And I don't really know how to shake that belief in people. But the useful thing is that every 4 years, as the pendulum swings, we get a new crop of people interested in privacy tech. So, that's what I mean is like, it's
Yes.
not a catastrophic crisis, but in their mind, politically, it's a partisan crisis to them. And so, it kind of stirs their interest. So maybe
Yeah.
as more as the pendulum swifts, more and more people become interested in privacy, and as more and more people become interested, the products become hopefully easier to use and less evil. So that's kind of my optimistic take on it.
I love it. Let's with all of that wrap up here, Stephen. Uncomfortable question. What
Mhm.
if most people prefer beautiful surveillance over ugly freedom, and not to cast all freedom tech in that vein, but if it's the perspective is sort of on that two or almost two poles, if that's true, like what are we building for? Is it the 1% who care, or do you think we've got a shot at broader adoption of freedom tech?
I think that there's definitely a trend where people just want the as you put it, the beautiful surveillance over the ugly freedom, but it doesn't have to be that way. Um, I think freedom tech products can be beautiful in terms of having beautiful interfaces. Uh, Part of that is, helping, projects, helping freedom tech projects to care about like kind of having beautiful interfaces. Part of it is getting designers interested in working on these projects, which is always the challenge. But um, that's one part of the equation. I think though that it can also be kind of a Trojan horse type of scenario where if you build a product that's useful for other means, then it doesn't like you can work these freedom tech things in there in meaningful ways. So, like for example, like what Square's doing with onboarding, with Bitcoin support. Well, it's custodial, but they're like onboarding a ton of
Yeah,
merchants,
it's a
and that
start.
opens the door for merchants. Yeah, it opens the door. Stuff like Signal and Proton makes privacy more accessible. I think, you know, the more products we have that try to work this stuff in here, the better. And I guess this would really be a good place to highlight that I don't. I've heard people kind of like a lot of people like think of me as like, okay, I'm a product designer. I really try to think of myself these days as more as like I'm a Bitcoin UX guy. I like to think about these things not just from a design perspective, but also from an engineering perspective, because I think that good user experience is not just a design problem. I think that user experience is, it's a problem to solve. Some UX problems have design solutions and some have engineering problems.
Great
Like
point.
some have engineering solutions. And so like sometimes it's just about like working until we have the optimal engineering solution to make this stuff easier to use. I mean, definitely all the work around like with like secure enclaves and stuff like that is a great start. Um, so there's design solutions, there's engineering solutions. It's not always just about like making the interface more beautiful to use. Like for example, you shared with me some of like your master UX research that you were doing. And I liked that, what you had in that document was not just, oh, it doesn't look pretty enough. It was that you're actually going into like under the hood. The problem with some of these Nostr products is that they're, from an engineering perspective, they're like you had a page on there just about they're like waiting to display a list of results until they've queried every relay in their stack. That's an engineering problem.
Right,
And,
absolutely.
so we just, we have to, get more freedom tech people interested in product, and we have to get more product people interested in freedom tech. But, I'm overall optimistic that we can, you know, work freedom tech into every aspect of people's lives in a way that even if they don't know that it's there, it benefits them.
LFG. That is fantastic. That is the place to put it. Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate it. And I do want to thank you specifically for all the work you do. Bitcoin Design Guide, the community that you, I know, at least co-lead, if not initiated. in Discord and elsewhere. These are really important initiatives, great contributions. So thank you for that. Thanks for the time today.
Well, I want to go ahead and actually on that point, thank you. And I want to go ahead and clear something. So I did not start Bitcoin design. It was actually, a group of designers on the internet who started it actually before me. I think, Daniel Nord and Christoph Ono were some of the earliest ones there. Now the kind of community is kind of led mostly by Christoph and Mageshni. So unfortunately, I don't, contribute to the design community as much as I used to did. But I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things a little bit. We have a project at Voltage now called the Bitcoin Builder Kit, where we're trying to kind of componentize. It's an open source project we're kind of doing in public in the design community, where we're trying to kind of componentize some aspects of Bitcoin UX so that other product teams can use this stuff, and also make it easier for AIs to consume some of this stuff.
Very interesting.
But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to make
Well,
sure
no,
give
thank you.
credit where it's due there.
Please, thanks for the correction, and thanks to the other team members. And I will look forward to
Yeah.
checking that out.
Yeah, common misconception because I'm one of the Bitcoin designers in the US, and so
Yes.
I end up at conferences more, and
Right,
so
right. You're the face or a
people
face.
sometimes assume, yeah, at least in the US, I
Right.
ended up several years ago being like the face, but it's like a whole global initiative.
It is, yes,
Um,
and thank you for that, and it's important.
yeah,
And I think it's a good cautionary note that we don't assume that all of this stuff just happens stateside. Well, thanks again, Steve, and I'll get all those links out so people who are interested can dig in. And I think you have left, from an engineer, a product designer, to an individual who just wants to pay, as you say, the barista for their coffee. There's a lot to take away here, and I appreciate it. Hope to catch up and talk with you soon, Stephen. Thanks so much.
yeah. Thanks so much, Sean. It's been fun.
Bye-bye.